Hi, everybody. It's Joe. We're on Facebook Live. Glad you're here, and I hope that the switched night didn't throw you. But here we are, Thursday night, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock East Coast, 4 o'clock Hawaii time. There may be some Hawaii guests tonight, unless Steinmetzes and Stones are just complete slackers. So I'm glad everybody's here. In fact, there isn't anybody here yet, but we'll wait for you. Good. Kim Lavazette has joined. Kim is here tonight to help me field questions. And so here's the way this is going to roll. If you have any questions at all you have to do is type them in anytime, and Kim will call my attention to them, and we'll take a moment and answer those questions. Right, Kim?
Right.
That's kind of what we're doing, right? So I see Jason Mitchell's joined us. Hi, Jason. Glad you're here. One of the things that we did last weekend was talked about what it takes to live the kind of life that we're all longing to live. Hi, Michelle. It's good to see you. Glad you're here. And in other words, it seems like we sometimes have the idea that we can just kind of make big changes in our life any way and any time we want to, but I don't really find that is the case. Change is hard, and growth is hard. Healing is hard. If you want to call it healing or change or growth, they're not all three exactly the same, but they're similar, and they kind of just run into one another. And so I think it's important for us to understand that what we're talking about isn't easy. But we like bumper stickerable kinds of slogans, and we kind of try to make things like bite-sized, and we reduce them down sometimes to a place where they're not really what it is we're talking about anymore. And I want to say hi to Marie Rios, and maybe even Tony in the background. Glad you're here, Marie. And so I want to show you what I mean. This idea of dumbing down things is really important. And so I want to read you a couple of quotations that I talked about on Sunday. One from Henry David Thoreau, one from Mahatma Gandhi. So listen to this. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined. That sounds so awesome. And we see it on the bumper sticker on the back of cars, and we see it attributed to Thoreau. But the only problem with that is that's not what he said. So it's been oversimplified till it sounds really good, and it gets people excited. But how do you do that? Now listen to what Thoreau really said. He said this: I learned this, at least by experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he'll meet with a success unexpected in common hours. Now, what does that mean? Simple. When Henry David Thoreau was 28, he decided to go confidently in the direction of his dreams, and so he moved to a secluded pond in New Hampshire, or Walden Pond, and stayed there for 2 years, living a life of simplicity. He wrote a book about it and kind of committed his life to it. And so it's not just, wake up in the morning and go in the direction of your dreams. No, it's count the cost and realize that making a change in your life isn't as simple as just, changing your shirt. It's not simple. It's not easy. Now, I want to be sure that I get my old saying in here. It's not complicated, but it's not easy, okay? And what I mean, if you've been around at all, you've heard me say this a million times, without exaggeration. It's like digging a ditch. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. It's not complicated. Now, let me give you another quotation. This one I have actually on my refrigerator, on a refrigerator magnet. Kim is looking at my refrigerator to see if I'm telling the truth. Be the change you want to see in the world. And it's attributed to Gandhi. And actually, it's attributed to a lot of people, but the most popular name after this is Gandhi, but that's not what he said. This is what he said. He said this: but we mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do. Now, talk about a man that's committed. Mahatma Gandhi went on at least 20 hunger strikes that lasted for over 20 days. He led the world in civil disobedience, peaceful protest. I learned from Thoreau how to do that and taught our own, some of our own heroes how to do that. And was assassinated in 1948 by being shot in the chest 3 times. So what I'm saying is, you don't have to move to a pond and live, there all by yourself. Hi, Gretchen. It's good to see you. And Lynn Everly joined in. You don't have to go on hunger strike and live a life that gets you assassinated. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is you have to be able to actually think through this enough so that the changes that you want to make, the healing that you want to participate in, so that you can rearrange your life around those things. Because it isn't just like the flavor of the week or the month. It takes a commitment. Now, this is how Jesus said it. Jesus said, anyone who comes after me, but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, can't be my disciple. Anyone who won't shoulder his own cross and follow me can't be my disciple. Simply put, if you're not willing to take what's dearest to you, whether plans or people, and kiss it goodbye, you can't be my disciple. What is that? I thought we could just, taste and see and put our foot in the water, and you can. But you can't do that and still call yourself a Christ follower. You can't rearrange your life around love and expand your capacity of love without paying some kind of a price. Ouch is right. It's not easy. What we're talking about requires, dare I say it, training and discipline. What I find is that people get disappointed with God easily because they think they have a deal, right? My job was to just kind of put a bumper sticker on my car or wear a Christian t-shirt, and God's job is to take care of my life and make sure that I'm happy and healthy and well-fed, and obviously that's not the case. It's important, friends, that we realize that change is like digging a ditch. It is a decision, Amanda, thank you. It is a decision. It's a decision that we have to make that will require us to rearrange our lives around a new set of activities. Again, think about training. Lynn is training to run a marathon, and she has absolutely rearranged her life, at least to the degree that she can, around that future goal. And she has rearranged her life around certain practices. Tomorrow morning, she'll get up at 4 a.m. and she'll go for a run. It'll be dark, and it won't be easy to get up. And she's doing these kinds of things because she wants to be able to do something in the future that she can't now do. And by the way, that's the very definition of training. Doing what you can do now long enough so that you can allow yourself to do something in the future that you can't do now. That's training. And so training to be a disciple of the one, of the Christ, is a decision, and it will require something of you. It's interesting that when I talk about God, and I talk about God, you can't talk about God without talking about love, right? God is love. That sometimes people wonder, well, when you talk about God, all you talk about is love, love, love. Why is it you only talk about love? And the reason I only talk about love is because that's all there is. There is love, and everything else is is a facade. Everything else, even power, is something that's made up. It's a fantasy. Control, it's a fantasy. There is one thing, and it's love. And if you want to participate in a life of love, to the degree that you're willing to rearrange your life around it, around the practices that are required to expand your capacity to love, you will live a life that looks like the life Jesus lived. So let me give you another illustration of what I'm saying. Luke chapter 2. Dr. Luke is giving us some insights into the life of Jesus. And Jesus is 12 years old. And Luke takes us into a Passover celebration. Mary and Joseph and some other family members traveled to Jerusalem from Nazareth. It's a long trip. It's a big deal. It's actually the 12th year for Jesus, so it's a big year for him in the Jewish system of bar mitzvah, becoming a child of the book. And you know the story if you've spent any time in the Bible. Luke tells us that Mary and Jesus packed up and were on their way home, and Jesus stayed in the temple. And he was asking questions, and he was engaged in the life of the teaching of the temple. He was enamored with it, really. Well, at the end of the day, on their travels, Mary and Joseph go, where's Jesus? And Mary thought Joseph had him, Joseph thought Mary had him, and they realized that they didn't have him, that he wasn't in the caravan. And so they're out one day, they go back to Jerusalem, that's day 2, and it takes them a day to actually find him. So he's missing for 3 days in a city where there are about 1 million people. And we're not talking about a first century city we're talking about a first century city. No cell phones, no phones at all. Dust and crime and, it's just, imagine the scene. And they come upon Jesus in the temple, and Mary looks at him and says, "Why have you treated us this way?" And Jesus looks at Mary and says, didn't you know that I was supposed to be about my Father's business? And I'm not sure about that answer. But this is what Mary is saying. Now, I want to be careful here, but this is what Mary is saying. This is what Mary is saying. You have not treated us in a very loving way, young man. You have been self-centered. And Luke does something really amazing here. He says this, and so Jesus decided to go back to Nazareth with them and become obedient to them. And Jesus then, after the decision, right, Amanda? After the decision, the decision of what? Of obedience, of willingly. And obedience means, it's a Greek word, hupotasso, that means to put yourself under the will of another. This is what we don't want to do. We don't want to put ourselves under the will of another, even if the other is God. So Jesus hupotassoed himself to Mary and Joseph. And then Luke says, and he grew. That's the beginning of growth. When I rearrange my life around something that's more important than my own self-will. Now, I believe that when Jesus did that, the Spirit of Christ filled him to the brim, and Jesus grew in wisdom, Scripture says, in stature, in favor with God, in favor with man. And then we don't hear about him again until he's 30 years old and a rabbi. Now, so let's just do a little bit of math and back up just a little bit. And hey, Key, it's good to see you online, brother. I'm glad you're with us. And Ray Hausler, I'm glad you're here too. Let's do a little bit of math. 12 years old to 30 years old. How many years is that, Kim? Yes, exactly. 18 years. 18 years of obedient living, of rearranging your life around expanding your capacity to love. And what do you get? You get the Jesus that we meet in the Gospels. That's the life that God asks us to live. Now, interestingly, Lynn and I were just talking about this a little while ago. Jesus does something really remarkable. in the Gospel of John when he says this. He puts love and obedience in the same sentence. Okay, so what's the relationship between love and obedience? Between living a life of love and the necessary aspect of obedience. Jesus says this: if you love me, you will obey the things I've asked you to do. Hi, Cheryl. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're with us. So, it's not obedience or love, right? It's not obedience or love, friends. It's not dry obedience or mushy love. Love, real love, isn't mushy. It's not an emotion. It's an attitude. Love is the only right motive for obedience that leads us to a life of growing and changing. That leads us to the life that we all long to live. A healthy life that includes healing and beauty and a capacity to love that's actually miraculous. Jesus goes on to say how miraculous that kind of love is in the book of Matthew. In his best sermon, Sermon on the Mount, he says this: love your enemies. What good is it if you only love people who love you back? No. That's not really what I'm after. I'm after the kind of love that's impossible for a human being. Love your enemies. Pray for those who despitefully use you and say all manner of evil against you. Those are the kind of people I want you to love. In fact, Jesus goes on. He's on a roll, right? And the Jews are going, what are you talking about? What? Love our enemies? We want to kill our enemies. Remember, they thought he was going to be a military messiah that would, throw off Rome. Hey, Deb, good to see you. And Jim, glad you're with us. They thought that Jesus was going to be some kind of a military leader that would throw off the shackles of Rome. That's what they were dreaming of. But what does Jesus say to them? Love your enemies. Love Romans? Wait a minute. And then Jesus goes a step further when he says this: if a Roman soldier asks you to carry his pack a mile, what I'd like you to do is carry it 2 miles. We don't understand how ridiculous that is and how impossible it was for a first century Jewish human being to do. You see, what Jesus asks us to do is impossible for a human being that hasn't rearranged their life around the idea of growing in their capacity to love. That's what it takes. And so when Jesus says, I want you to count the cost, what he's saying is, realize that you have to live differently if you want to have this life. So what I'm saying tonight is simple. You know, we're finishing up the Undivided Life series this last weekend. And what we wanted to do is say, you know, there's a way to live kind of this solid life where you're inside and your outside match, where there is an alignment, where there's an integration, and your heart and your mind and your soul are kind of all moving towards the same direction. That's a healthy, beautiful way to live. It's the way we were designed to live. But and we said there are some things that you have to do in order to live that kind of life. And those things aren't simple. They're not hard, but they're not complicated. But you have to do them. You can't just think that they'll happen by accident. You actually have to do them. I used a quotation that Kim posted on the Facebook page earlier this week from Yoda.
Do the voice.
I'm sorry?
Do the voice.
Use the Force?
No, use your Yoda voice.
Oh, use my Yoda voice. I don't know how to do a Yoda voice. I'm not sure what Kim is talking about. So the quotation is important and powerful, right? Do or do not. There is no try. You can't just say, I'm going to try to do this. No, friends. You can't say, I'm going to try to love my enemies. Or let's just make it even more simple. You can't say, I'm going to try to be patient. I'm going to try to be more patient. You've said that 1 billion times and it hasn't worked. I'm going to try and overlook. I'm going to try to be more patient in the traffic tomorrow. I'm going to try not to. There is no try. You have to train to live that kind of a life. And if you know me, you know that I am not Mr. Dogmatic about a lot of things. But I am dogmatic about this. A life of love doesn't happen by accident. Just doesn't. Just like Steph Curry's jump shot doesn't happen by accident. One of the websites I went to check into his training says that he trains each day until he makes 500 three-pointers. He doesn't take 500. He trains until he makes 500. 500. And so when he gets into a game and it seems so natural, you know, the moves he makes and the shots he takes, and then all of a sudden the buzzer's about to go off and he takes about a half-court three-pointer and it goes right through the hoop and everybody goes, "Ah, how lucky." And he has that look on his face. You know what that look means? That look means, I've trained for this. I rearranged my life so that I could do this. Now, rearranging your life so that you can shoot a three-pointer is one thing. Rearranging your life so that you can love in a miraculous way is something else. And that's what we're talking about. So, some things are important. One of them is to kind of change what you think about and what you're soaking up all day. That was one of the ideas in our series. Remember, we talked about a sponge. We human beings are like sponges, and we soak up what we're put in. So put yourself in the right place. Paul said it in Philippians chapter 4. Think about the right kind of things. Robert Singler, dude, I love you and miss you. It's good to see you. And I love the fact that you've just typed that quote in there. And I remember one of the first times you and I sat down together, you read me 1 Corinthians 13, Robert, and you said, so at the end of the passage, until then, these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And you asked me, as a pastor, what do you think is the most important thing? And I said to you, well, love. And I remember you being shocked that a pastor would say love was the most important thing and not faith. Think that that's accurate. But it's true, isn't it, brother? Love. And so, friends, I talked about in this series just doing 4 big ideas. 1, putting yourself in places where you're soaking up the right stuff, reading the right stuff. 2, making sure that you begin your day. Just know that you're waking up and pray one of the prayers that we talked about, the prayer of the Aptina elders, the serenity prayer, the prayer of St. Francis. It's about an awareness. And then you have to do and review. In other words, you have to understand that it's going to require you to rearrange your life. You have to do these things. You can't just try them. So, I don't know what else to say about this tonight. I want to remind you that what we're doing is we're learning to live a life in union with the Son, in service to the Father, through the power of the Spirit, for the benefit of the world. And some people ask me, well, what's God's job and what's my job? What's God's job in my growth and my change, and what's my job? And that's a really good question. I think I was confused about it for most of my life. But I've gotten some clarity on it, and it's simply this. I have to do the things that I have to do to live a life in union with the Christ, the eternal Christ. Richard Rohr calls him the cosmic Christ. The Christ that existed even before Jesus existed. The Christ that John talks about in John 1. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is the Spirit of Christ. I have to live my life in union with the Spirit of Christ. The Spirit of Christ is already living in service to the Father. He's already living in the power of the Spirit. He's already living for the benefit of the world. And our job is to join Him. And so our job is to every day, as often as we can, to maintain an alignment with the Spirit of Christ in our life. Now, I can't tell you exactly how that will happen for you because everyone is different, but I can tell you how it happens for me. It happens when I wake up in the morning and I just take a moment and I realize I'm awake. And I whisper the Jesus prayer to myself a few times. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, sinner. And then I know that I'm awake. And then I begin my day. Some days I'll wear my prayer bracelet, my knotted prayer rope, and I'll use it during the day. Other days I won't, but most days I say that prayer a lot. It requires me to remember who I am and who God is. Michael Stone in Hawaii, it's good to see you, brother, and I'm grateful for you. It requires me to stop filling my mind with certain things and start filling my mind with other things. That's an important thing for me. I can lose myself in things that are unimportant, and so I have to constantly refocus. Now, I have a distinct advantage, I think, over the average person in this sense, that when I'm at my desk in the office, I can actually be doing these spiritual exercises, and my boss isn't going to come in and go, what in the world are you doing? Why don't you get some work done? Because that is my work. So, and I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for it to no end. So, what I'm saying is this: it's not as simple as you may think it is. It's hard. Let me just rephrase that. It's simple, but it's hard. Okay. The simplicity is rearrange your life around certain things, and you don't have to have a list of 10 of them. 4 or 5 things. Rearrange your life around those things, and you will see growth and change, and your capacity to love will increase. And I'd like to say those things will become easier to do. I'm not sure that that's the case. It isn't the case for me. It's still hard. I keep asking Lynn in her running, are you beginning to love to run? And I hear people asking that. And she'll go, yeah, no. Have you had a runner's high? And I think I can remember her saying one time she felt that kind of euphoria. But it doesn't happen often. But she gets up and she runs. Hi, Judy. I'm glad you're here. So let me just say a few things in closing. Kim, where are we with time?
3 minutes.
Okay, so in the last 3 minutes, let me just say this. This weekend at the Quest, we're going to start a new sermon series. And it's a sermon series about a subject that I've never done a sermon series about. And I've been doing this now for about 25 years. And I'm about out of topics. So I'm not doing this now because I didn't have anything else to talk about. I'm doing a sermon series called Rethinking Heaven. And we're going to be talking about what happens next. What might happen when you die. Those of you who know me know of some of my own personal events and how I lost my father in a very tragic way this last June. And it got me thinking about a lot of things. And so this weekend is going to be a really important sermon because we're going to talk about the why. Why should we be concerned about what happens next? Why? My experience is that when people start talking about heaven, we kind of lose them. And they just long for it. And, you know, what they want to be is airlifted somehow. And they become little or no use helping the rest of us who are concerned about the problems the world is struggling with. I don't think that has to happen. And in fact, I think if we have a right understanding about what happens next, that our lives will become more important to us in the impact that they'll have. So I want to invite you into that. On Sunday, we're also going to launch a brand new website. Hi, Lauren. It's good to see you. And Monica, it's good to see you. So, brand new website on Sunday that I'm really looking forward to. And then next Monday morning, we're going to start a new Facebook-based ritual. I don't know what we'll call it. It's called Morning Joe. And if you sign on, you'll get about a 90-second encouragement from me every morning. That will just be kind of a good starter, and I hope that that's helpful. So we're done tonight. I'm really grateful for you spending time with us. My hope is that this is helpful for you, and I want you to know that I'm open to your input and suggestions from everybody except for Susie Steinmetz. So Susie, I'm just joking. Can't wait till you get home. Michael and Jen, hopefully you guys are enjoying yourselves on vacation, and please greet everyone for me. Amanda, thank you for your care. So good night, everybody. Once again, from Novato, I pray that you're well, and I hope to see you soon. Good night.